I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking about acupuncture and really how we can use this on the fertility journey to help with stress. So we're talking about if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling that there's all these things that you need to do on your huge to-do list in life, and then also on the fertility journey, how acupuncture can help with that. And really, how do we start to set boundaries, notice our own patterns? And if we've been told something about our diagnosis that we're running out of time, our fertility is about to fall off a cliff at a certain age, how do we look at this differently and get back to trusting our body? I would like to invite you and your partner to a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call. This call is for you if you meet at least one of the following criteria. You've been trying to get pregnant for at least 2 years. You've been through at least one failed IUI or IVF. This call is for action takers. If you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. If you're seriously considering work with us, go to fabfertile.com. That's fabfertile.com and click on Apply Here. That's fabfertile, fabfertile.com, and click on Apply Here. Then you'll be booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. There's a lot of information about which supplements are right for fertility. And like most couples I speak with, you are probably taking a lot of supplements. But are these supplements optimizing or harming your fertility? That's why we recommend professional grade supplements without harmful dyes, fillers, or top allergens so that you can prepare your body in the best way for pregnancy. And as you may know, we take a functional approach to fertility. And while supplements are included in your customized protocols, which are based on testing, they are only part of the equation because there's no pill you can take that will out-supplement the basics, such as poor diet, dysregulated sleep, either moving too much or not enough, and not dealing with chronic stress. So we do recommend basic supplements for both men and women. And these are essential starters that you need to have right now to optimize your preconception health. And I'm excited to offer you a special discount at our Fab Fertile store. You'll receive 15% discount on our professional grade supplements. So simply go to Fab Fertile Store, that's FAB, fertilestore.com, to access the basic supplements so that you can prepare your body for pregnancy success without wasting time and money on supplements that may not be right for you. Go to Fab Fertile Store, that's fabfertilestore.com, and save 15% on your order. Hey there. Thanks so much for listening to the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast. And I've got a favor to ask you. If you are enjoying learning about the functional approach to fertility, consider going to iTunes and rating and reviewing the podcast. This is how it helps the show reach more people that are struggling with infertility, knowing that there's another approach that really can get to the bottom of why it's not working in the first place. So all you need to do is, if you're on the app or the desktop, just go in and consider leaving a 5-star rating and leave a review. And there is step-by-step instructions in the show notes showing you exactly how to do that. So if you can just take a few minutes right now, you can pause this recording, come back, leave the review. It would really mean the world to me and help others that are on the fertility journey as well. I didn't need to go to donor eggs. Obviously, I don't regret it. I have beautiful children. I could have done things differently, restored. I was still cycling back in my 20s. I could have looked at my health, the environmental toxins, the stress I was under.
Many women are being told their eggs are too old. That's often merely an assumption that's not based on actual evidence. The reason being that there is no direct test of egg quality. You can't test egg quality.
It's the man who's got a food sensitivity or he has a zinc deficiency.
Like, there can be a root cause to these symptoms that are, quote unquote, period problems, that the doctor will pass you a pill without any question of why.
And some part of you knows that if you can reframe your journey from not want to struggle, or if it is struggle, learn how to embrace the struggle. Learn how to embrace it.
Most conditions in the child occur during the 9 months of development. It's the genetic switches are turned on or turned off, and they're pre-programmed. So you are in such a powerful, amazing position to do amazing things for your kids.
Why is IVF the first step? Because we believe it should be the last step. Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey there, I'm Sarah Clark, founder of Fab Fertile and your host. I believe the functional approach is the first step for anyone struggling with infertility, and my aim is to help you get pregnant naturally. Today, I'm welcoming Tsao-Lin to the podcast, and we're digging into how acupuncture can help improve fertility and help you deal with stress. Tsao-Lin has over 19 years of experience as an expert in alternative and Chinese medicine. She's the founder of Integrative Healing Arts, which uses Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbal medicine, and energy healing to treat patients. It is her integrative approach using the ancient Eastern philosophy and healing methods while supporting Western scientific paradigms of health. This is a powerful combination that helps patients learn how to heal so they can take charge of their health destiny. She is the author of the best-selling book, Will I Ever Get Pregnant? The Smart Woman's Guide to Get Pregnant Naturally Over 40. Using her expertise in fertility, she helps women heal underlying health issues and improve their fertility so they can get pregnant naturally using her signature fertility acupuncture protocols and Chinese medicine. Thanks so much for listening. I'm so thankful that you're here. Make sure you hit subscribe. And if you know someone else who is on the fertility journey, please share this podcast with them. Hey, Cho, excited to have you on the podcast.
I'm excited to be here, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. So if you could share with us really how you came to do this work. I think you have quite a journey and a story.
Oh, wow. Okay. So in particular with fertility, in Chinese medicine, you become expert by the people who come to you. You know, that is where you gain your experience. And for me, as I have in my book, like what really led me more to fertility is I had this woman and she had, I think, one tube left and she was going to be doing an IVF. And I realized how, like, she was terrified of needles, but she was there, even shaking on the table, doing whatever she could to improve her fertility. And it really struck me that women are so underserved in health, and also once they are of a certain age or they have some underlying health conditions that haven't been addressed, that it becomes more and more difficult for them to get pregnant naturally and have healthy pregnancies and deliver. Back in 2002, there was a study that came out in Germany, which is why women started to come. And this was for IVF, IUI. So the study showed that doing acupuncture prior to transfer and after transfer increased the chances of a healthy pregnancy to like 47%. It was a huge percentage mark. And the study was a good study because it was really women, and they were in their 40, that age group or later. And they either did acupuncture or they didn't. It wasn't like, let's do fake acupuncture, let's pretend. It was really a group. These people did it, these women did, and these women did not. So the other thing too is, 19 years ago, 20 years ago, women that were a little older were seeking to be treated. They were going more for IVF and IUI. They may have married later or had their career, and then it was time to get pregnant. Basically, they were going to the clinics because in New York, at least when you were 40, after 40, they weren't going to take you, right? So it was like a private, you weren't covered, hospitals weren't going to do it because there was this idea of statistical decline. And so the pressure to get pregnant once they hit 40 was tremendous. And then, of course, it still is. So it was really motivating these women to do everything. And so I realized how incredible Chinese medicine is, that there's such a long history of treating women, their cycle, fertility, miscarriage, all of that, and a way to serve. So that's how I got into it. That's a long story. Mm-hmm. And I love it, to help someone, help a woman, help a couple, even single women to get pregnant. I feel very honored. And I'm sure you have that similar, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then maybe just talk a little bit more about how acupuncture can help with fertility for us.
Acupuncture is a non-drug. It helps the body to get into that state of self-healing. We call the parasympathetic state. Research shows that real acupuncture points They light up different parts of the brain, but also release neuropeptides, which tell the body to heal and to self regulate. And of course, we can't really know exactly how it works, right? Because there is a process to it, and each person is treated personally. It's their individual, how their body will receive it, which I would say 99%, it's good, relieving stress, helping to self regulate. And that's a big part of it. So with the acupuncture, this is energy medicine. And with fertility, and I believe it, we're more than just biology and hormones. There is the aspect of having whole health, right? Fertility health is a symptom of your whole health.
Mhm.
And so what we're looking at is doing acupuncture and also Chinese herbs is really working with a woman's body, a man's body too, so that they go back into balance. The body is always looking to go into homeostasis, to go and move towards balance. And it isn't a straight line. Sometimes something else has to occur. And in Chinese medicine, there are so many patterns that someone could have. Why something is not working on the surface may seem, oh, that this is the problem, when in fact it could be something that occurred a really long time ago, and that has set up this imbalance. And then the body's trying to get around it to compensate. So similar to if you sprain your ankle, in order to heal, the body may create a lot of scar tissue. And when that scar tissue is there, it's a form of stabilizing. And at the same time, it could actually cause problems with your lower back, right? Because you don't have full function or optimal function. So we look at all of the aspects of someone's life, including what's happening in their family, their diet, their stressors, their environment. Are they exercising? What kind of thoughts? Like thoughts are a big deal. So with the acupuncture, those neuropeptides tell the body to go into that state of rest and digest, which is when someone is very stressed out, they can reach a point where they can't really get there. They go to sleep, they sleep for hours, but they wake up tired. And we know that that means that they're not getting the deeper restorative cycles of sleep, which then in turn will affect their hormones and their emotions and their serotonin and all of that. We say acupuncture, Chinese medicine looks at really helping that person to balance what their natural proclivity is. That this is nature, right? We're just helping to kind of, make sure that the sunlight is getting to the leaves, so to speak.
Great. Yeah. I started doing acupuncture, I don't know, years ago. Now I haven't been consistent, but whenever I do it, I guess I go in there typically for stress relief. And when I come out, there's like this little state of like Zen like bliss where you're just going to come out. And yeah, so I find it really helpful. And it's interesting. I'm reading a book right now called Burnout. It's interesting when they were doing that, they were writing the book, they were asking people, women, because it's really about women that are experiencing more burnout. Not that men don't experience it, but it was saying not one woman said, what's burnout when they're researching? No one said, I don't know what that is. Because women or society, or we're just like, go, go, go. Especially on the fertility journey, there can be a lot of, you got to do this, you got to do that, all this huge list of what to eat, what to do. And even that can be overwhelming, combined with the actual stress of an infertility diagnosis and then the stress of daily life. How would acupuncture then help with stress, and really how often do you recommend it to see the best results?
Sure. Okay. So one thing in terms of, how I work with women is really in a program format, and we
Mhm.
look at cycle tracking, but also the biggest piece is that voice in your head.
Yeah.
And what I realize is that, the women that are suffering the most or struggling are successful women. And they do. Burnout is a thing. This is a kind of a very masculine world, and it's about going and doing more. And when you're stressed out, the one thing that you don't want to do is start a diet, right? Or stop smoking, or I need to exercise more, is really to take things off of your plate and make these shifts. First of all, often I don't agree with the diagnosis of infertility.
Right.
That's like a big thing. I find that that is really traumatizing and plays into these underlying societal beliefs of maybe not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not tall enough, you're not skinny, like all of that, which is pressure on women. And then you see women after they have a child, they're like, they need to be the perfect mom. They're breastfeeding till 5 years old or making organic baby food or like the society. And you start to look at the marketing, actually puts a lot of ideas into women's minds about that they're not good enough, that this is a problem. The first thing is to look at that it's not true, right? Again, chronological and biological age are not the same. Fertility is not only biology and hormones, there's more to it. And much of it is taking charge of your body. It is your body. You need to make that connection, that mind body connection. So that's a big thing with acupuncture and Chinese medicine. I say acupuncture and Chinese medicine because acupuncture is one of the tools of creating that mind body connection so that you become self aware. Someone can say, oh, fertility diet. Well, for who? All women are not the same. They're not. And chasing a kind of a fertility perfection, going after the job, the perfect grade, the Ivy League college, the perfect body, you cannot use the same approach when you want to have a baby. You have to kind of let go of certain ideas. Not to say not to do something, but it's that kind of driving, I need to get it, causes a lot of adrenaline and the anguish and the anxiety of like, what if it won't happen, right? There's like all of that feeling, and that goes against having life, having a baby, like your body. You're basically creating a stress factor there. And because the feelings that it's not in your control and all the messages of you're not good enough and it's out of your control and you have to go to an expert for someone to explain your own body parts, for someone who is highly successful, it is something that really creates even more stress and anxiety because it has nothing to do with intelligence and academics. This is about that mind body connection and including what are your thoughts? What is in your head? And then connecting that to doing things to recognize what puts you into that state of stress and really recognizing what is stress. So a lot of women go, I'm not stressed.
Mhm.
It's like your hair is falling out, you're breaking out in a rash, your digestion is off. Of course, your body's responding. And if you have an idea that no, stress is an event, it's an experience. What are you experiencing? Even if you think you're not, you have to look at the evidence and really connect with it, including who are you talking to? Like this is a detoxing out of the internet. I have to say, trigger warning, right? Because I did it in a clubhouse and I was told, you have to say trigger warning. I was like, no cookies, which means clear the cookies on your phones and your tablets and your laptops. Because once you do certain searches, those cookies follow you and they will start to send you advertisements or pop up articles that maybe you're interested in and to continue to perpetuate the fear. And that's something that has a negative effect on the success. We see it in school. If you think you're not smart, you're actually not going to do as well. And so this is a big part of working with acupuncture and Chinese medicine. So the acupuncture really, you actually feel, as you said, you kind of feel after, wow, I feel relaxed. You become much more aware of your body. And when you are aware, you are in control, realize you are in charge and get to know that. We know that we can control our blood pressure, we can control our heart rate, our breathing. We have within us a lot of control over our circumstances. And that means that we can also control our inflammation. We need to be conscious, though, of what's there. So that is How does that help with stress? A lot, because stress comes a lot from not feeling like you have any control.
Yeah, that's okay. When I was diagnosed with premature ovarian insufficiency, I didn't get a second opinion. I raced off to donor eggs. Obviously, I was successful with that. But looking back, at the time, I actually would have said I wasn't stressed. But meanwhile, I remember having like TMJ. I couldn't even open my mouth. I was like, at one point, even going across the street to the mailbox seemed like a huge task that I couldn't even do. And I'm like a huge doer. And so it's interesting, right? With the physical symptoms, we're like, oh, wait, I'm not stressed. I just keep going. But you've got all those other symptoms that you're ignoring. I had skin rashes and didn't have digestive issues at that stage. But obviously I had a fertility diagnosis there at 28. And the stress piece, I think if you are that type A controlling, planning, going kind of person, because I remember someone telling me years ago, oh yeah, I just wake up and I go with the flow. And I thought, well, that sounds like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. How could anyone do that? But in the meantime, I was there banging my head against the wall, getting so frustrated. And as I do start to access the flow and go with that, things actually do go a little smoother instead of trying to force it. So it's not like the analogy, it's not lying on the couch and doing nothing. You're still moving forward and still taking action, but not in this like crazy foot to the ground with the accelerator just blowing down the highway.
Well, that won't get you anywhere. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what you are actually describing is the life force. And that's chi. That's described in the East. You could call it prana. It's really understanding this life force that is all around us and within us. And in the classic texts that like the ancients believed that optimal health is achieved by understanding how to transform the energies of the universe and not outside of you, but the energies of the universe that are within you, because that's what flows within. And for women, once they get their cycle, right, the idea is that is considered a heavenly water, like coming from the heavens, not the Christian heavens, but the idea of this kind of flow of energy that like passes through the heart and to the uterus. There is a channel, it's called the Bao Mai, which is really the connection between the heart and the uterus, which women have. I don't think men have it. And it's really why our, being that anxiety, when you have anxiety, that you can even feel like the closing of your throat, that can happen. And then what you are cutting off is that energy. It's that flow of just being and allowing. And so that is a big part of that concept of getting into alignment, what that is. So working on diet and all these little pieces is only part. You have to look at what is the big puzzle there and then how to adjust your position in order to actually see really what's going on. And it's a bigger piece. It's not just I don't have enough of this vitamin, that vitamin, and I need to do this exercise and more and more and more. It's really like, okay, what do I need? Because everything is already here for us. And I'll tell you also, Sarah, you're describing the type A personality, which is very much in New York. I'm sure it's also in the big cities in Toronto. And people that end up having conditions that are kind of autoimmune, which means they're worse with stress, they get triggered, are that type A personality because their way of going and doing something is to power through it, is to just get up, do it, use their adrenaline. Stress is their driver, and that just has a counter effect. And even with like exercise, it's really like people are stressed and they need to discharge that energy. And so they go for this mega run and they get that adrenaline rush to kind of like discharge it. But what's happening is that they're under stress kind of like all the time. And so the adrenaline is constantly like squirting. And so if they don't kind of do that running, it builds up. And so that's that energy feeling of like getting stuck and really needing to get rid of it. In the long run, it's not a great place to be because then there's the crash. That's the burnout. The crashing is the burnout, right? And we see it with sleep when someone goes, oh, no, I sleep great. As soon as my head hits the pillow, I'm out. I'm like, okay, so you're crashing.
That's exhaustion. Yeah.
It's exhaustion. It's to the point of exhaustion. And, when you're stressed, in that case, sometimes that's the only way people can get to sleep is that they just exhaust themselves until they can. And you see with like kids, it's terrible. They're cranky and crying and all of that when they're overtired. And that's us in adult form, right?
That's right. That's right. It's interesting. I see my daughter, she's almost 20, and it's interesting. She decides that she wants to work 7 days a week, have 3 jobs, go. And I'm like, we need to take some time off. She's like, Mom, I don't need time off. I'm like, you need to have some time off to recharge. And she's like, oh, I just want to keep going. And I'm like, oh boy. So it's interesting where you can see these patterns. I really have worked a lot on myself, right? It's not a perfect thing, but now I see my daughter doing a similar pattern of like working yourself to, you finish her university and then just go straight into work. And I'm like, you can hang out on the beach. You can read, you can take some time for yourself. So I just keep repeating that to her. I have noticed she's now decided to take some days off, but it's interesting where we think that we have to keep going. And then the body's like, I just want to sleep. I just want to relax. And I'm like to my daughter, well, why are we feeling a little cranky? I know for me, when I'm out of alignment is when I start being a pain in the ass. If I'm cranky or not happy, it's on me that I have not done what needs to be done for myself, whether it's time to myself, to read, to get to bed early, to watch a junkie show that I like, or to be outside in nature.
Inflammation will cause you to be cranky. That's that PMS stuff.
Yeah.
It's literally an inflammatory situation in your body, which is the premenstrual kind of that stuff. So if you're in a bad mood or you find yourself looking at things pretty negatively, it's a good indication that you probably have some kind of inflammation that's going, which then you can look around and find an excuse for, like, oh yeah, the person bothered me, right? So we can always justify a reason for being in a kind of a bad mood. But it really starts because we're already in an inflammatory state. And then really like knowing that we need to do something about that preemptively to get it. Because once you're in, then you don't really see your way out. Even if like, I know I should be doing this thing, or all of a sudden it's like, why would I meditate? I know meditation helps me, but I don't feel like it. So creating things like a practice so that preemptively you just know that like, this is going to help me so I won't be in that state, because it's not fun. Even like little kids, when they're cranky, they don't feel good. They don't like to be that way. They'd rather be smiling and laughing. And us too, adults. And the thing about the working, we don't realize how much we are so much a part of a capitalist idea of like working, and our value is how much we can produce. That's our thing. Like, oh, why do you need to work so much? Because our value we link to is really almost like a price tag of productivity and production. Then we're on this kind of a hamster wheel, and someone else decides what is our value. This is an aspect I've been kind of thinking about a little more, and about this kind of capitalist idea of how much you work, how much you get paid, how much time is off, what you should be, like all of that. And really too much looks like being farm animals. Like that's and unfortunately for women with women's health, the idea of like going into menopause and aging, we're so culturally devalued if you don't work, but our wisdom is not really valued. We always look, oh, well, you're not making money, and therefore your value is less. And the fact that we have life experience is not taken into account. And that's very different in the thinking from the East. The elder people, they hold this wisdom because they've lived. I mean, this is empirical knowledge. That's a whole other tangent that I could go off on. But it starts actually earlier for women. What is their value? If they struggle with fertility, they're going to be sent to the glue factory.
Yeah. It's interesting with the working too piece, right? Like saying the boundaries being another catchphrase. But for me, I always think I can get things really quickly, but it's like, if I'm in this huge working phase, and then when I'm like, okay, this weekend, I'm going to put everything down. And actually, I can't fully relax actually until Sunday, because Saturday I'm still got all the stuff from the week that I'm trying to do, even though Saturday is supposed to be my day off. And then I'm like working on the Saturday. And then I'm like, oh, actually, I'm not relaxed until the Sunday or the Monday, because I'm still got it twirling around in my mind. It's interesting with being able to disconnect, because I'm usually quite good about chopping things off and putting it in a, here's time for work, here's time for play. But it is interesting how that stuff kind of migrates around. And it might just be also in the time we're in, where we're not, we're still practically in lockdown, where we are just sort of your friends and your social network. I see obviously a lot of people on Zoom, but it's still not the same as like, oh, wait, I've got to go out tonight to see my friend and go for a walk. And I couldn't really do that because a lot of my friends didn't want to walk with me. So it is interesting how the social connection piece, when you don't have that, to me, it does take work to foster it and to make sure that you include that as part of your life, because it could go for months without even talking to anybody. So I always make sure that I keep those connections going. Friendships, I've got a group of like 8 to 10 women that I've been friends with since I was 12. And we regularly get together. But during this time, it's been a little longer. And I'm like, oh, you miss that laughter and those kind of things. That's part of helping with your self-care and your lifestyle.
Absolutely. I mean, on the one hand, the things that are online connect you. And on the other hand, the whole world can come in as well. So before you know it, you've got these invaders or ideas and things that may not be so healthy. So those boundaries, really important to be clear about. And that's, again, yourself. Like when we look at the statistics, oftentimes someone said, look, what are my chances of getting pregnant? And I'm like, your chances are as good as anybody's. Those statistics are other people's, and they're taken at a particular time. And it's not therefore evidence that that's your path. We're so kind of scientifically, statistically minded and very reductive that it's all too easy for women to fall into this trap of like, oh, but I'm 35 and now my fertility is going to fall off a cliff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, scare tactics, right? When you get those diagnoses, and then it's like that diagnosis kind of embeds in our subconscious, and we're like, it'll never work. Well, if we go out to the analogy of we know our body best, you get back to your intuition, to the trust, because that other piece is just perpetuates a huge amount of fear and like the panic and the impatience and holy crap, I better run to whatever treatment I need to do without addressing the root cause. Yeah.
To fix it in a way. And so a diagnosis is really a label of a series of symptoms. They're all kind of bundled together. So it's not a death sentence. It's like a whole series of things. So you're like, okay, so that puts me into this category because I have all of these things, but it's not necessarily the same as everybody else. You have to kind of look at it from a big picture. Like you have choices that you can make. You also have your history, some of the genetics. There's another thing too, is this, when you've been around for a while, and I know you have a child that is college age, like I do, then you've kind of been on the fertility scene for some time and witnessed not only that fertility stuff, but all like the health things that like vitamin E for everyone and this and that. And there's always like the next thing, the ICSI, the egg freezing, the genetic testing. And you start to see that there are these trends. And what I've seen, and I don't know if you've seen it, is that younger and younger women are kind of getting the same talk about, oh, your fertility, your numbers are down. And, the same talk that, let's say, 18, 19 years ago, that the women that would come in my office that were like 39 and 40, they're getting the same kind of fear talk. Oh, well, if you want to have a family, if you want this, then you need to do that. Women are falling prey to this idea that if they don't start freezing their eggs earlier and earlier, that they're not going to be able to have children, and that they have to make a choice between one or the other. Last, I guess it was Sunday, I was on Clubhouse, and this woman, she was 25 and she said, oh, or when she was 18, she went and they found out she had polycystic ovary syndrome. And they said like, oh, you need to go to a fertility clinic right away.
Oh dear.
And I was, did you say, oh dear?
Oh dear. Yeah.
Oh dear. I was like, whoa, that is so wrong to do that. And another woman was saying, she was 25 and she was told, oh, you've got polycystic ovary syndrome. And this is actually the PCOS cocoon on Clubhouse, that group. And the first thing she said that she's like, maybe I shouldn't have pursued my career. I put my career first instead of this. I was like, okay, I have to say something about this, because that's the first thing that women, they blame themselves for something that is not true. Then when you go into the medical system, they also are blaming you. Like they're inferring like, oh, you're something wrong.
You're too long. Yeah.
Or you waited too long, or you should have done, it's too late for you. Oh, but I have the solution, or something like that. And really getting back to when we first started, like women are very poorly served in medicine. And so much of it is just based on the biases that are there. And you see it, like the history of medicine is based on bias. It's very male dominated. And then everything moving forward is based on like, oh, well, in this study, we saw that. And then in this study, we saw that. And then when you start to go like, wait a second, but all those studies were like based on a bunch of guys that were thinking, this is what women's problems were, based on the idea further back about women being witches, or, so you kind of used to sort of like, okay, you can actually see that the underlying ideas that are there, women's libido and their reproduction has to be managed and controlled. And the fact that women prior to were really considered more possessions, similar to cattle. That's the idea. And without the freedom in the US, of course, reproductive rights is a big deal. I'm not sure how it bodes in Canada, but it's also the right to be able to have a child, not just the birth control. And it's really who has access, and really the idea of like who has this knowledge about their own body. And then you can make choices, informed choices.
Yeah, I think that's key. With that egg freezing piece, to me, it's like the false sense of security, because who's to say when you thaw them that they'll work? So it's like getting younger women to freeze their eggs. And then if they are looking at their AMH levels and saying, oh, something's off, you better, rush, and there's nothing you can do. And it is that perpetuating the fear. And then so many people that are doing cycles like IVF or things like that, the first thing they're doing is put them on birth control to regulate the cycle. And I'm like, okay, just a lot of interesting things that are happening.
Hormones are not, they are endocrine disruptors. With any of these hormones, it's not just going only to one area. They are endocrine disruptors, meaning they are going to disrupt your entire endocrine system. And then the result is, yes, it'll prevent pregnancy. So we see it with like pesticides and all kinds of things. So when you look at it, it's not safe. It's not a safe long-term solution, because you call it birth control. That's the end result, is that it's going to do something there, but it's also doing something to the rest of your body. So I'm very against hormonal birth control, especially with teenage girls. Their brains are still developing. Does that have an effect on a developing mind? And studies show that birth control actually causes depression.
I see it firsthand with my daughter's friends.
Yes. And so all of a sudden, highly medicated. And so you look at this again and then of course with birth control can lower the libido, which is this idea of like, okay, women's sexuality is in there too, but birth control does not prevent from getting a sexually transmitted disease, right? So it's also this false sense of, like the worst thing, getting pregnant. There are these things that you can get that will affect your fertility, like pelvic inflammatory diseases and stuff. So when you look at women's reproductive health and you start to look at the bias, kind of getting back to it, like, why is this something that females should sign up for? it's really disconnecting from your body even more and more.
Yep.
Right?
And I was placed because of the premature ovarian insufficiency. I was placed on, birth control and HRT for years and years, and then predisposed to food sensitivities, gut infections, negatively impacted my health. And we see this all the time.
And cancer.
Yeah.
Ovarian cancer or other, then you see the trend again, you're going through one thing on hormone replacement therapy. No one wants to eat cattle that has, antibiotics and hormone injections. Yeah. And yet with women's health, how many women are on some kind of hormones and then mood stabilizers to numb and dull their senses. And then you look at the long-term effects, yes, with the gut. And then later on, looking at going through menopause or, as your hormones are shifting out, then there's a higher incidence of developing cancer, which then that's a whole other funnel for going through these treatments, which are things that could be prevented. There's a lot in health that can be prevented.
And then as far as acupuncture, any final thoughts you wanted to share with us regarding
Absolutely. Not just acupuncture, but Chinese medicine is to really, and I know some of the questions will be like, what's the frequency? Well, when I work with someone, I'm looking at least once a week. We're looking at like 3 to 6 months. And this is to help rebalance the system and to also do a lot of other things, focusing on the whole health as the picture. Because if that's not in order, then what'll happen is that the fertility piece is not going to happen. And stress plays a huge role, right? We look at like animals in captivity are really stressed out and they cannot reproduce. And so we're also looking at, to look at women's health or women's state. If women are stressed, it is difficult, and we see the evidence of it. We see that around the world, the more and more struggles with fertility. But we also have to look at who's determining if 1 year you're trying, that's 12 times, right? And if you don't get it right within 12 possible times, then there's something wrong with you. And then we have to look at what about the male factor? If women are having problems, then men for sure are having problems. And it can't be only the woman's responsibility. And that's like another idea, like, oh, it's a woman's fault about it. So my thoughts are seek out somebody to help doing acupuncture, Chinese medicine, because it's also about like food and mindfulness, environmental exercise, like all of those things to fit in a way that will help to balance your life and help overall health and wellness and connect to that higher energy to be in alignment. And that will make it so that the possibility to conceive is much greater.
I love that. And so where can the listeners connect with you, Jill?
Oh, definitely on Instagram. It'll be under my name, Tsao-Lin Moy. I guess you can spell it for them. I also have a website, which is www.integrativehealingarts.com, and on Clubhouse as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Cho, for coming on, sharing your words of wisdom on this topic and really helping us kind of see the connections and how we can then make changes in our lives. And there's a systemic thing going on here, but we can start to question things and trusting ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope like this conversation as just one woman that it'll help, then, that would be great.
Awesome. Thanks again, Cho. I would like to invite you and your partner to a Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call. This call is for you if you meet at least one of the following criteria. You've been trying to get pregnant for at least 2 years. You've been through at least one failed IUI or IVF. This call is for action takers. If you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. If you're seriously considering work with us, go to fabfertile.com. That's fabfertile.com and click on Apply Here. That's fabfertile, fabfertile.com, and click on Apply Here. Then you'll be booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. You may be taking supplements that instead of optimizing your fertility, may be harming it. That's why we recommend professional grade supplements without harmful dyes, fillers, or top allergens. Simply go to Fab Fertile Store, that's F-A-B Fertile Store, getpregnantnaturally.com to receive a 15% discount on our basic supplement recommendations for preconception health. That's fabfertilestore.com. The Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, including show notes and links, provides information with respect to healthy living, nutrition, lab testing, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.